So like most homesteaders, we are striving for self-sufficiency here on our homestead. Last year, we actually undershot a little bit. We didn't factor in that our kids are going to start eating as much as us two adults. We ran out of white potatoes and sweet potatoes this year, and also beef, but we have some ideas to up our game this year, and we're gonna take you around the farm and show you what we have going on.
We believe that the key to self-sufficiency over the long haul is efficiency. We see so many people get so overwhelmed and burned out from trying to take on too much, and they eventually quit homesteading, and I think that's really sad. It's something that we want to do for the long haul. So along with realizing that we're going to need to grow more food this year, we also want to try to make things more efficient so we can do that without getting burned out. So we're going to make some changes around here, and I want to show you a few things that we're going to do.
I have a goal to become more and more efficient every single year. And one way that I do that is I stop and ask myself, what was my biggest barrier last year? What was the thing I spent the most time on? What was the thing that frustrated me the most? Last year, the thing that frustrated me the most was weeding, and the other thing was getting my plants out in really wet soil in the spring. So this year, to overcome that problem, we are putting in 10 raised beds, and that will help take care of the soil wetness issue. And also, weeding in these raised beds is so much easier than just in a regular garden. I can't really explain why, but it just is.
Michelle does most of the work in the gardens. I help her with that, but that's not the real stressor for me. The real stressor for me is the work that I do with the animals. And last year, the biggest thing was the chickens. And we're doing something pretty major to try to change that up this year that we're gonna have to go over in a little bit. But first, let's talk about the things that we're actually gonna grow this year to be more self-sufficient and grow more of our own food. Because we're more than farmers.
Last year, because of what I talked about previously, our soil was too wet, and so I ended up getting the potatoes out too late. The soil conditions were not ideal, and so they didn't do as good as they should have. This year, we got them planted here in the front garden in beautiful soil with compost. It's very loose up here, so we're hoping for a big crop of white potatoes this year. White potatoes are number one on my list of self-sufficiency vegetables because number one, they're hardy. Number two, they have very little pest pressure. They're very easy to grow, and most importantly for me, no processing. I can just throw them straight into my root cellar and they will last all year long. So like I said, we did run out of white potatoes this year, but I'm really not sweating it. We have a couple months before these will be ready, but it really is okay. I am very intentional about not letting homesteading be my slave master. We are planting more sweet potatoes this year. Last year, we planted about 25 to 30 sweet potato slips. This year I'm doing 40. Our sweet potatoes last year did much better in the raised bed than they did just in the ground. We have issues with like fungus or something, I don't know. So we are doing them all of them in the raised beds this year. We are doing Vardaman and Covington varieties. They're both bush plants. That means they don't runner so much and you don't have sweet potatoes like everywhere. You just have the sweet potatoes at the base of the plant. That's a huge efficiency thing for us. We have, in past years, had to dig up like our entire garden while we were digging sweet potatoes because they were everywhere.
I like Bobby, Mama. Like Bobby.
You like your puppy?
Yeah.
So as you can see, Cody is still working on our raised beds, but we have plans to fill at least one raised bed full of butternut squash. That's definitely a staple for us. I love it for pumpkin pies and butternut squash soup and things like that. Last year I completely failed at that because I waited too long to plant them because here again the soil was too wet. So they did nothing. We bought squash from an Amish farm. They didn't last very long. I think they had like spots and stuff that just made them rot really fast. So this year butternut squash is definitely on our list. We don't do pumpkins because of like powdery mildew is a real issue, but butternut squash seems to do the best at bearing before they're completely killed from the powdery mildew. So
something that we're really excited about is we added grapes to our homestead this year. Not one of those things that would go in a survival garden, food you would need to grow to survive, but definitely a part of self-sufficiency, growing more and more of the food that we love to eat.
We actually did really well with onions last year. I actually still have a ton left over, so I won't be upping my game with onions this year. I do 4 packages with 25 plants in each. and that lasts us for a solid year. I'll also be doing the same as I did last year with garlic. I just do like a little plot.
Raspberries are another thing that is a big part of being self-sufficient.
I think I have more raspberries than anything else.
Another one of those things to keep us out of the grocery store. Some of you have had questions about how our raspberry trellis did and if I've done anything different. This is how I first built the trellis, but last year I added another board here and have another wire going around it. Some of the plants that didn't make it all the way up to here were hanging out, and so we need another wire on the outside of that, but I needed to take it off so that I could till beside it. I haven't tilled yet. That still needs to get done. It works really, really great, and we get tons of raspberries off of that patch.
Carrots are also a staple, so we'll be doing those this year as well. I like to do spring carrots and then also fall carrots, just so that the fall ones last a little bit longer. We have strawberries here. We're gonna plant some zucchini, sweet corn, green beans. We plan to put our tomatoes in right here. This year I plan to do 15. That might not sound like many, but we like to space our tomatoes far apart, fertilize them, prune them, take really good care of them, and honestly, we come out of this garden with pounds and pounds and pounds of tomatoes.
I'm headed out to the back pasture because I want to talk a little bit about what we're going to do for beef and milk this year, but while we're on our way back there, let's stop and take a look at the bees. Bees are something we added last year to our homestead to be more self-sufficient. It went pretty well last year. I lost a couple colonies. Looks like this one's a fail too. But I've still got one that's going really strong. I need to check them. And I did for this year also set out a few swarm traps. So I'm really hoping to catch some bees and be able to fill up these other 2 hives at least, maybe even more. Hey, Maddie. Having raw dairy on the homestead is my absolute favorite thing about being self-sufficient. I love the milk. I love the products we can make from it. Our cow Maddie is pregnant, which is awesome. She's pregnant! Woo! You got to keep them having calves to keep the milk production up. She's starting to taper off a little bit, but she'll be in full production again early this winter. Peaches still won't let me get close enough to touch her. That's a heifer right there that we're raising to get processed for beef. She's actually going in a few weeks to get processed. Our first cow was a Jersey cow, and I would get her bred to an Angus bull. And so we'd have half Angus calves that we'd raise for beef. Well, since we got our Guernsey cow, I use sex semen for her, and I raise heifer calves that we sell as future family milk cows. So since that dynamic has changed, I haven't really gotten in a good rhythm of getting calves in time to get beef processed as often as we need it. And so I didn't get one soon enough. We ended up running out of beef. I really don't like that I have to go out and buy calves to raise for beef. So I'd really like to start raising our own beef. I'm thinking about possibly getting into mini Herefords or possibly Dexters. Need something small because we just don't have enough property to raise some full-size cows, but I think we could do something like that and it could work out for beef for just our family.
Our goal when we first started homesteading was to grow enough food to sell as well as to feed ourselves. But our focus now is shifting where we would like to have our homestead just for us. That is why I took out a whole bunch of my rhubarb patch. We ended up taking out most of our rhubarb patch. I just left one plant.
Chickens are obviously a big part of self-sufficiency on a homestead. Like a lot of you, that's how we got started in homesteading. We had chickens and a little garden. We've got egg-laying hens and we raise our own meat birds. I should have a batch of meat birds going right now, but if you saw in one of our previous videos, the ones that came were all dead on arrival, all except for a few of them that I ended up giving away. So the hatchery is sending us a new batch of those in a week or so. And we usually raise about 50 to 55 of those for our family for the year. This year we'll probably do at least 60. And for the egg layers, we haven't been just keeping enough chickens for eggs for ourselves, but we've also been selling eggs at a local store, and we were selling eggs to a restaurant for a while. We had ideas of making that into a big part of a farm business for us. And I think we could do it if we really wanted to, but I think we would need to scale it bigger. Having a lot of chickens is something that I wanted to do for the farm business part of it, but I don't just love having and taking care of chickens like I love having the cows. It was just a lot of work, and we were making some money with it, but I decided it wasn't enough money that it was worth all the extra stress and hassle that was putting on us. I still want to have enough chickens for eggs for us, so we've kept about 20 hens. But one thing you will notice is that these chickens are still in a hoop house, and they really could and should be out on pasture. But I've got to figure out how exactly I want to do it. I'm not sure if I want to do another electric net type of thing because of the hawk pressure that we had last year. So I might be making another chicken tractor, kind of like we use for our meat chickens, but with nesting boxes in it. We'll have to see how that goes, but you might be seeing me build a chicken tractor before too long.
And here's our asparagus patch. You can see how massive this is. I think it's at least 100 plants, and it's a lot of work. And asparagus does make a lot of money, so it's a nice thing for the kids to do. But we are rethinking this, thinking maybe we'll take out half of it or 3/4 of it next year. We're just not sure yet.
Just as a side note, it was really hard for me to give up the egg business and to sell all those chickens. Like I said, it wasn't something that I just loved, like I loved the cows, but it was still really hard because it felt like a dream that had died. One thing that I've found with homesteading and with a lot of life is just because you change your mind and go in a little bit different direction doesn't mean that something has died or you're losing something. Sometimes you're replacing it with something better. And in this case, it might be replacing it with just better mental health that's not as stressful. Or it might be that I have more time to spend with my family, or it might be that I have more time to be able to get mini Herefords. So many people get overwhelmed and burned out and stop homesteading altogether. And I don't want that to happen. So we gotta make what we have more manageable and more efficient so we can keep this thing going and be self-sufficient for as long as possible.